I want to move on to financial product sensitivity. Can you talk about what that is?
Yeah, so this is a paper with Hal Hirschfield and with Adam Greenberg. And in this paper, um, we look at this idea of the fact that I think it's like probably very obvious to you and to most of your listeners, right? That it's not like you have financial products that are good or bad. There's massive variation across them. And within the academic literature, there tends to be this focus on describing these broad patterns around how people feel about investments. So, like, what is your risk tolerance, for example, or like in the context of debt, people are described as being debt averse, and there's sort of a long list of papers where people are being described as disliking holding debt. They're going to prepay on their mortgages. They're going to not take out student loans they they just don't want to take on the debt, even if the sort of educational returns would be valuable. And that's sort of lumped together with not liking to have credit card debt or not wanting to take out a payday loan. And sort of all of these are often lumped together as describing people being debt averse. And so one of the insights that we had in terms of thinking about this paper is the idea that actually the fact that you think about debt or investment opportunities categorically could be problematic in and of itself, or could be a sign of something bad in and of itself. That actually the ability to be sensitive to the terms of the product, or at least sensitive in like super broad strokes, because we don't look at sort of trade-offs of very specific terms. We're looking at trade-offs of large products. And so in the context of financial product sensitivity here, what we're examining is basically just people's ability to discriminate across different types of debt and across different types of investment opportunities.
So how do attitudes towards debt and investment products vary across consumers?
So, so we find that there is variation where some consumers are just going to be sort of across the board. I don't want to invest in, like, I'm afraid of taking risk and I don't want to invest in anything, or across the board, I don't want to have debt, and so I'm not going to take out debt for to buy a new purse or a new pair of shoes, and I'm also not going to take out debt to buy a house or invest in some very stable long-term investment. And what we find is that other people, right, are very sensitive to these differences and are going to stop and think to themselves, like, well, is this a good investment opportunity or bad investment opportunity? Is it, how risky is it? Or on the context of debt side, does this have the opportunity to be, lead to some beneficial returns? And so what we find is that people who have this ability to discriminate across different types of debt and investment opportunities tend to be better off financially by a variety of different metrics. So, for example, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has a 10-item financial wellness scale. And what we find is that this ability to discriminate across different debt types tends to be pretty good in terms of predicting how financially well off you are. And so one of the interesting things about this is you might say, okay, well, you're clearly just picking up on financial literacy, right? Like, it's a different type of person who knows these differences. But what we find is that even after you control for things like financial literacy and numeracy, that this differential sensitivity to the financial products continues to be predictive of these financial outcomes. And so in these studies, we're just asking people simple questions like to think about investing in a penny stock versus a mutual fund, or to think about borrowing for on a mortgage versus on a credit card. And we look at the differences in how much people, both in terms of like their comfort level with the financial product, as well as with how financially wise of a decision they think it would be for the different types of products that we would categorize as being sort of like better and worse is one way of thinking about it, or having high or low interest rates is another way of thinking about it. And what we see is that this is predictive sort of above and beyond financial literacy and numeracy. And one of the reasons that I think that this is it's getting at something that is more psychological, particularly this idea of discomfort or comfort with the financial instrument, that it's more similar to something like pain of paying. It's a feeling that I have, more than it's about the explicit knowledge of what the product is.
That's really interesting. So distinct from financial literacy and numeracy, but people who have financial product sensitivity are making better decisions. Is that right?
Well, they're making more nuanced decisions. Yeah. So like you could imagine there's sort of different states of the world. So when we started this project, you could imagine maybe people who are debt averse are just avoiding all of these bad situations. And so they might be better off financially because they're sort of avoiding all of the debt. And so that could be good. Or they could be, avoiding making investments that are too risky, or the opposite could be like they're taking on debt, they're taking on these risks, and that's actually super, super helpful to them because like people don't take enough risks, and maybe taking more risks is going to be good. But that's not what we end up finding. What we end up finding is that this is predictive of financial well-being, and you can think of this as related also to just this cognitive flexibility. And so I'm willing to, or frankly, critical thinking, like I'm willing to stop and think about what are the specific details of this particular situation and what does this opportunity represent. And so this flexibility in my thinking is going to end up serving me well versus like broadly categorizing everything as good or bad.
Yeah, okay. That's really interesting. And then there's variation in financial product sensitivity across the population.
Exactly, right? So there's a large amount of variation that we find, and that's what allows us to see this difference in terms of the predictive ability of financial outcomes.
Are there interventions that can help people who are maybe not so sensitive to different financial products, help them make better decisions when they're choosing financial products?
Yeah, I mean, so in the paper, what we look at are essentially like an informational intervention or like a learning intervention where we help people either see debt as all good or all bad, or we help people think about the nuance in the opportunity. And so I think getting people to think more flexibly, and to think about ways that there are great times to take a debt. Like you could imagine, this isn't something that we look at directly, but you could imagine giving lots of examples of really wealthy people who have tons and tons of debt because they've been using this as leverage to invest in great opportunities. These sorts of interventions that help people think more flexibly about cases where debt is good or bad, or investment opportunities are going to be some are going to be good and some are going to be bad. Helping people think more flexibly about these products should be helpful in general to motivate people to be more thoughtful, rather than having some sort of knee-jerk reaction and just going from there.
Yeah, okay, it makes sense. I mean, it's like somebody who always thinks equity mutual funds are a bad thing is probably not going to make good financial decisions. But someone who always thinks it's a good thing, if it doesn't fit their financial situation, they're probably going to make bad decisions. So it's having that more nuanced perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah, really, really interesting. And that's related empirically to financial wellness, is what your research showed. Yeah, very cool.